Discover 5 transformative Stoic secrets that reveal amazing inner growth you never knew existed. Sarah's hands trembled as she wiped down the diner counter, a bouncy tune from the jukebox lacing through the cramped space while the scent of greasy burgers hung in the air. She forced her lips into a smile. Every heartwarming conversation with a customer was merely a disguise for the weariness weighing down her spirit. The clang of dishes and the chatter of talkative diners became a background hum to the constant churning in her mind. Sometimes it felt like she was drowning in responsibilities, and her dreams of becoming an attorney seemed to slip further away every day. At 32, she was a single mother working double shifts, struggling to support her spirited 7-year-old daughter, Mia. With each punch of the time clock, dread pooled in her stomach. Was this all she'd ever amount to? The roar of discontent grew louder every time she pushed aside thoughts of class schedules and bar exams for the sake of bills. She glanced down at her uniform, the bright red apron practically a shackle binding her to a life she had never wanted. Her grandfather's words often echoed in her mind. He had faced adversity as an immigrant with unwavering resolve, yet here she stood, too scared to grasp the dreams he'd secretly nurtured in her. As she returned home from the diner late that night, exhaustion cloaked her. She collapsed onto the attic floor, instinctively sifting through boxes. Here, in the dusty corners, lay remnants of a life she could barely remember. Then she saw it, a worn leather journal crammed with her grandfather's reflections on Stoic philosophy. Her heart raced as she flicked through his raw, poignant insights about resilience, integrity, and accepting hardship. But as she took in his wisdom, shadows of doubt screamed louder. What did it matter? How could ideals guide her family through mounting bills, and how could she hope to fulfill her aspirations when her own boss scoffed openly at ambition? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That thought of inadequacy gripped her tighter. How could she sit idly as her dismissive boss belittled a colleague during dinner rush, leering at the very people who fought to keep their heads above water? Shame and indignation roared within her. Yet, she couldn't shake the looming fear of retaliation, of losing the fragile income she needed. A terrible battle raged, intertwining her desperate desire for justice with all-consuming insecurity. Caught between a life of servitude and the courage instilled by those philosophical lessons, Sarah felt the tension tighten mercilessly. Sometimes, it felt like her grandfather's words were a whispering curse reminding her to confront her truths, to slay the fear holding her hostage. But could she ignite that fire without burning down her only means of providing for Mia? Deep breath, inhale, exhale. The fragile balance tipped precariously. She felt every ounce of her resolve flicker and fade as the day approached when she would have to choose between standing up for herself and the safety of their unstable footing. The storm clouds of uncertainty loomed larger. Could she push back against her nightmares, or would they swallow her whole? The choice lay ahead like a shadow stretching out into the horizon. The morning light peeked through the slats of the attic window as Sarah lay sprawled on the wooden floor, still clutching her grandfather's journal. With each deep breath, she felt the weight of the world pressing on her chest, an anchor pulling her deeper into suffocating despair. She had always admired her grandfather's tenacious spirit, yet as she clutched the journal, she wondered if resilience was too lofty a trait for someone like her. The promise of another long shift loomed over her, a single night away. But it was the looming confrontations that charged her heart with anxiety. The thought of facing her boss sent tremors of dread coursing through her. Could she transform those whispers of courage, scattered amongst her grandfather's teachings, into an action that defied her self-imposed limitations? As she jogged through memories of his lessons on Stoicism, she recalled his proclamation, "Virtue is the only good." To act in accordance with virtue, regardless of the outcome, is the true path to happiness. Perhaps the first step towards clarity lay in embracing that very notion, living with courage, regardless of external validation or fear of repercussions. With this newfound determination, she made a plan. Sarah envisioned approaching her boss, not with aggression, but with the poise of one who understood her value. That night, as she scrubbed dishes under the fluorescent lights, a quiet confidence formed in her mind. Each plate that slipped through her hands felt like a step towards reclaiming her story. Her interactions grew intentional. She began noticing the way her colleague, Daisy, flinched under their boss's bark, eyes skirting the room for reassurance. The anger that had once consumed Sarah transformed into a protective shield. Daisy was young and driven. She reminded Sarah of herself just a few years ago, full of ambition, yet tamed by fear. "Daisy, hang in there," Sarah whispered softly as they stood side by side washing up. "You have every right to speak up for yourself. Remember who you are." The affirmation sparked something within her, echoing her grandfather's lessons. Acting for the good of others pushed her closer to her own convictions. As the diner quieted and their shift ended, Sarah knew the moment was ripe for a reckoning. The shadows of their boss's derision grew heavier, an ominous tape looping in her mind. Tomorrow, Sarah promised herself, bringing her focus back to the words of courage scribbled in the pages of her grandfather's journal. Still, the night before felt perilous. Tension coiled tightly, the uncertainty of the next day's confrontation gripping her. What if things fell apart? What if this decision cost her everything? The possibility loomed with a sinister weight. In the dim glow of the kitchen light, she filled a glass with water and steadied her breath. The lines between doubt and resolve blurred, but deep within her grew a flicker of clarity. She must confront her fears head-on. This was perhaps the most important battle yet, the battle for her dignity, and for Mia's future. As Sarah drifted into a restless sleep, the consequences of her potential actions danced at the forefront of her mind, weaving a tapestry of anxiety and hope. A new day dawned the following morning, but Sarah felt an internal struggle boiling within her. Would she have the strength to act, to break free from those paralyzing chains that had held her for so long? The moment approached, and anxiety bubbled as she prepared to enter the diner once more, uncertain of what awaited. Would she rise as the courageous descendant of her grandfather, or would she retreat into the shadows of her fears? The time had come to face the daunting reality she had been dodging for far too long. As Sarah stepped into the diner, an electric tension crackled in the air around her. The familiar clang of utensils and the sizzling of the grill felt more like a cacophony than comfort. She swallowed hard, noticing her palms slick with sweat as they gripped the edges of her apron. Today was not merely another shift, it was an opportunity to rewrite the narrative of her life. Her heart pounded in her chest like a war drum, urging her forward as she saw her boss, Tom, already berating a new waiter at the register. The young man's shoulders slumped under the weight of Tom's criticisms, and for a fleeting moment, Sarah felt a kinship with him. Memories flooded back, the suffocating stares from Tom, the biting remarks that undermined her confidence. "Breathe," she mumbled to herself, feeling the words vibrate in her throat. It was a mantra her grandfather had instilled in her, a simple reminder to find steadiness in chaos. The scratchy edges of anxiety pulled at her resolve, but she was determined to honor her grandfather's spirit today. She positioned herself at the dishwashing station, deliberately placing the soapy dishes before her, and began scrubbing as if cleansing not only the plates but also her own emotions. Each swirl of the sponge became a reflection of her inner turmoil, a battleground where fear met her emerging courage. Yet, dullness still tugged at her consciousness. "Sarah?" Daisy's voice interrupted her thoughts, soft yet insistent, as she joined her at the sink. "Are you okay? You seem tense." The concern in Daisy's eyes ignited something in Sarah, a sense of purpose. "I need to talk to Tom today," she said, the words tumbling out before she had fully processed them. "I can't keep letting him talk to us that way." Daisy's expression shifted from concern to admiration. "You're so brave for wanting to confront him. Just remember, no matter what happens, you have every right to stand up for yourself." Invigorated by Daisy's encouragement, Sarah realized that her confrontation would not only impact her but also resonate with those around her. If she could find her voice, maybe it would inspire those muffled under Tom's contempt to do the same. This was more than a personal reckoning, it was an act of defiance. The moment arrived swiftly, and before she knew it, Tom loomed before her at the end of the shift, arms crossed and brows knit together as he surveyed the bustling diner. The murmur of conversations faded away, silenced by the weight of anticipation. "Sarah," he barked, his tone curt.
Have you got my orders in check, or are you planning on slacking off again?
A sharp intake of breath fell from her lips, every bit of confidence squeezing into mere words, but she stood her ground.
I need to talk to you.
The surprise flickered in his eyes, mixed with disdain.
About what? I don't have time for your whining.
About respect, she blurted out, surprising even herself with the strength of her voice. Each syllable felt like a stone dropped into a still pond, rippling outward.
You can't keep talking to us like we're nothing. We deserve to be treated with dignity, just like you would expect.
The silence stretched, and for an agonizing second, she feared he would laugh, an escalation of his familiar derision. Yet as she held his gaze, her resolve grew. Her heart raced, the confrontation teetered on the edge of chaos.
Are you finished?
Tom's voice had lost some of its edge, but the malice still simmered beneath. Not even close, she replied, emboldened. Behind her, she sensed the weight of Daisy's stare, inviting her to continue. There was a power in sharing vulnerability and anger. Suddenly, the space surrounding them pulsed with a burgeoning solidarity. Would her words resonate, breeding change? Or would Tom seek to snuff her light, a danger lurking within the walls of familiarity? The outcome loomed as an undeniable tension. Sarah was now dancing in the darkness of uncertainty, but she could feel the resilience of her grandfather surging within. "Let me finish what I started," she said, her pulse matching the rhythm of her courage. The moment was pivotal, a crossroads where her greatest fears met the possibility of profound transformation. With a resolve fortifying her, she pressed forward, ready to claim a voice that had long been dormant.
Thomas' expression shifted, the sharpness in his gaze momentarily flickering to something more cautious.
The diner buzzed around them, oblivious to the small tempest brewing at the counter. Sarah felt the weight of that gaze. She had breached a boundary, and there was no turning back now. "Okay, Sarah," he said, his tone a calculated mix of curiosity and irritation.
"You've got my attention. What do you think you have a right to say?"
There it was, a challenge cloaked in skepticism, but for Sarah, each word ignited a buried fire.
"I think we deserve to work in an environment where we're not constantly belittled.
It affects not just our morale, but it disrupts the teamwork that this diner relies on.
It needs to change." She took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of resolve.
The voices of doubt whispered, but she let them fade like distant echoes. "You need to consider how you speak to us, Tom.
We're people, your people, and we want to do well. But we can't thrive in an atmosphere of disdain." The silence between them climaxes, an unbearable tension was strung taut.
Tom seemed to be weighing the implications of Sarah's words, and the engine of anxiety inside her began to sputter.
What if she had just made matters worse? There was a flicker of something unrecognizable in his eyes, a mixture of contemplation and indignation, but it was broken when he retorted, "You think you can just walk in here and tell me how to manage?"
For too long, I've let fear stifle my voice, but I'm done pretending that it's acceptable to be silenced. If I'm going to keep working here, I need to see respect, not just in our interactions, but as a framework for this diner-esque culture. Sarah could feel a resonance in her proposition, like an unanswered question taking shape amidst the din.
Would others agree? Would they back her?
"No one is forcing you to stay, Sarah," he shot back, his bravado hinging precariously on simpering hostility.
"Maybe you're just too soft for this job."
She clenched her fists at her sides, but instead of retreating, she leaned into the vulnerability.
"Then it's time for you to realize that soft doesn't equate to weak. We're tired of being the bottom rung. Respect can elevate us, strengthen the team.
And maybe if you lead with that, it won't be just scared, frustrated employees you have, but a dedicated team ready to move mountains." Suddenly, she was not merely fighting for herself, she was fighting for the others, the ones nodding in support, the authentic workers who perhaps suffered quietly. There was a tangible shift, she felt it as if the air itself had thickened with possibility. Tom's brow furrowed deeper, but then a flicker of dawning realization crossed his face. For the first time, perhaps he was considering that working with the staff meant forming partnerships, not just wielding authority.
"Fine," he said at last, grudgingly but with a slight nod. "I'll think about what you've said.
But don't expect overnight changes." "Understood," she replied, allowing a small rush of relief to wash over her. As the diner resumed its hustle, Sarah reflected on the uncomfortable but vital conversation. She had stepped into the tumult with uncertainty, but now she felt the contours of something meaningful taking shape. Her voice mattered, and perhaps it could inspire others to reclaim their dignity too. Yet, still lurking at the back of her mind was the knowledge that this was only the beginning. Confronting Tom had ignited a spark, but sustaining this newfound energy would require more. How could she build upon this momentum? What steps would lead her and her co-workers to true empowerment? Leaving work that night, she gazed at the flickering neon signs of the diner, feeling the pulse of uncharted potential coursing through her. Would she take the plunge and explore the deeper layers of her own aspirations, or would she falter in the face of adversity? The stakes were rising, and Sarah was at a crossroads. What would she discover about herself next? The following morning brought a chorus of uncertainty, the sunlight streaming through the diner's windows illuminating the contrasting shades of hope and trepidation swirling within Sarah. The aftermath of her confrontation with Tom resonated in her mind as she prepared for another day of work. Her colleagues had whispered glimmers of support as they departed the night before, but she grappled with a pragmatic question: how could she sustain the momentum she had unwittingly started? As she slipped into her apron, the fabric felt heavier than usual. It was a reminder of the burdens she had carried but also a symbol of the battle she had just waged. Sarah glanced around the diner, taking note of her co-workers moving between tables, their faces etched with varying degrees of fatigue and disillusionment. She knew she wasn't alone in this fight, yet uncertainty clouded the path ahead. The morning rush commenced, and as the orders poured in, Sarah found herself strategizing silently. Was it possible to cultivate a sense of unity among the staff? She needed to gather all those moments of shared frustration into a collaborative voice, one that could demand the respect they all craved. But how would she rally them? Would they see her as a leader, or merely a meddler stirring up old grievances? During a brief lull, she rounded up a few of her co-workers at a corner booth, hearts pounding and hope fluttering. "I'm not asking for a lot," she began tentatively. "But I think we deserve to stand together for a better working environment. We can approach Tom as a united front." Tina, a waitress who had been at the diner for years, furrowed her brows. "And what if he just dismisses us?" Realizing that avoidance only perpetuated their struggles, Sarah felt a surge of determination. "If we don't think we deserve respect, no one else will either. Look, I challenged Tom yesterday. There's a chance for change, but I can't do it alone. I need your support." A murmur of reluctance washed through the group, and for a moment, doubt flooded her. Was this too ambitious? Then, she recalled that electric moment of clarity in her confrontation. What if we stand as a team? Change doesn't happen in silence. It's uncomfortable, but we have to push through it together. As they exchanged glances, little by little, Sarah sensed a shift. Tina offered a small nod, and David, who had often kept his head down, finally spoke up. "I've been thinking the same thing. We can't keep letting this go on." The initial hesitance transformed into an emerging consensus, and one by one, their spirits began to bolster. They spoke about their experiences, memories of how Thomas Barb stung, the dismissive comments that chipped away at their morale. It was cathartic, and in revealing their shared struggles, Sarah noticed something change in the air. After each story, they grew bolder. With newfound resolve, they crafted a plan, discussing specific points they wanted to address with Tom. Each voice added strength to the conversation, transforming anxiety into a burgeoning unity. They would present their concerns not as a complaint but as a powerful desire for collective improvement. As shadows began to lengthen, the time came for their face-off with Tom. The air thickened with anticipation. Sarah felt the pulse of her heart quicken. This was not just about her anymore, it was about everyone who had felt diminished under the weight of disrespect. She took a deep breath, clamping down on the flickering doubts that threatened to spiral once more. But before she could knock on Tom's office door, a sudden thought struck her. This was the moment they could either solidify their newfound solidarity or face a greater divide. What if Tom's reaction set a precedent for their futures? Was she ready for whatever came next? The door swung open, and in an instant, they entered a new frontier, one they would either traverse together or falter away from in fear. The stakes had never felt higher, and the path ahead glimmered with dual possibilities, empowerment or chaos.
Would they emerge stronger, or would doubts fracture their determination? The moment of confrontation loomed ahead, ready to redefine them all.
The door clicked shut behind them, the muffled din of the diner fading into an oppressive silence. Sarah found herself at the forefront, flanked by her colleagues, a line of silent resolve. The sheen on Tom's desk blazed under the fluorescent lights, as if beckoning them to collapse under its glare. Her heart drummed in her chest, half excitement, half dread. The moment had arrived, and with it came a flood of uncertainties. Tom's gaze lifted, a mix of irritation and intrigue passing across his features as he surveyed the assembled group.
"What's this about?"
He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, radiating an air of dismissal that threatened to crush Sarah's determination. Sarah inhaled deeply, the air felt charged, a tension swirling around the four of them that demanded action. "We wanted to talk about the work environment here," she started, her voice steadier than she felt. "A lot of us have been feeling undervalued." A snort escaped Tom's lips, an immediate reaction that sent her pulse racing.
"Undervalued? We're a diner, not a charity. You're here to serve, and you're being paid to do it. What's the problem?"
His words dripped with condescension, intent on sending them back to a state of silence. This wasn't just an argument about respect, it was about empowerment, about pushing back against a culture of silence. This was her moment of truth.
"Tom, it's not just about the money. It's about how our contributions are acknowledged or ignored.
We're motivated to do well, but the way we're treated makes it hard to keep that motivation alive." Beside her, Tina spoke up, emboldened by Sarah's lead.
"It's not that we want special treatment. We just want to be part of a team where everyone's effort counts."
David, usually quiet, jumped in with a surprising intensity.
"And we're tired of the insults.
They hurt morale, and that affects us all."
As they took turns articulating their frustrations, Sarah could feel the dynamics shifting.
What began as a mere whisper among the group transformed into a chorus of resolve.
The atmosphere thickened, each voice that rose in defiance forging additional bonds of solidarity.
It was exhilarating and terrifying, a dance between hope and the ghosts of their insecurities. But in Tom's eyes, something flickered in irritation mixed with a hint of uncertainty.
"You all really think this will change anything?"
he asked, voice laced with mockery. Sarah locked eyes with him, her resolve hardening.
"Yes, we do. And if you can't support us, then we will have to rethink our commitment to this diner." With this declaration, silence settled in the room. Tom leaned forward, the veneer of nonchalance cracking.
The implications of her statement were clear. Whether they stayed or left, they were already changing the dynamics. Tom remained still for a moment, his expression guarded. Sarah could almost see the wheels turning in his mind as he processed this shift. He had always held the power, but now he was witnessing a flicker of defiance in his once subservient staff. The next words he uttered would define their fates, acceptance or escalation.
Nervously, confusion ricocheted in her chest. Was she prepared for the consequences? Had they truly reached a point where standing up for themselves might lead to disarray?
"Let us see how this plays out," Tom finally said, a challenge hanging in the air.
"I'll need time to think."
As they filed out, an unsettling triumph coursed through Sarah. The uncertainty remained palpable, but something inside her had undeniably shifted. She had stepped into her strength, advocating not just for herself, but for her colleagues. Now, the battle for recognition was truly on. Navigating the potential fallout loomed large, but her resolve had been forged in the crucible of confrontation.
Would Tom retaliate? And what strength would arise if the stakes increased? With each step away from Tom's office, a familiar doubt began to creep back in. Had they gone too far?
The uncertainty lingered, casting a shadow over their small victory.
The next confrontation might not just be with Tom, it could lead her
into uncharted waters she hadn't anticipated, and the question gnawed at her: would she still be able to hold on to her newfound resolve when it was truly tested? The hallway stretched before Sarah like an uncharted path, echoes of her heartbeat matching the rhythm of her apprehension. As her colleagues drifted into their respective corners, the small victory they had wrested away from Tom's grasp left an oddly bitter taste in her mouth. No sooner had they stepped out of the office than doubts began to gnaw at her. Had their confrontation created fissures that would lead to deeper cracks in her professional environment? She paused, leaning against the cool wall, allowing herself a moment to breathe. It was a familiar ritual of reflection. What had she achieved, really? Tom's response hadn't been the enthusiastic endorsement they'd hoped for. It felt as if they hadn't quite crossed the precipice, but rather, been left teetering on the edge. Yet, inside her, a flicker of self-awareness ignited. For the first time, she had proclaimed her needs and the needs of her colleagues. The feeling of speaking her truth in the face of condescension sent adrenaline surging through her veins. Her previous life of silent submission now seemed like a distant echo. She couldn't dismiss that as immaterial. But the flames of courage came with their own set of consequences. How soon would Tom retaliate? Would he bolster his criticisms? With the diner's stakes precariously placed above personal livelihoods, second-guessing herself would be dangerous now. She needed to plan a blueprint for navigating the cascading implications of their actions. Sarah turned her focus inward, scrutinizing the resources she had overlooked before. Her instinct for leadership had been dormant but was now awakening. She recalled moments of uncharacteristic assertiveness, flashes of talent that shone through the mundane tasks they had been performing. It was time to build on that. A growing determination propelled her into action. Sarah decided to document her experiences, to write down the challenges they faced daily, moments like being belittled by customers or ignored in favor of more senior staff. A tangible account of their struggles would serve not just as evidence of their contributions but also as a manifesto for change within the diner. As she scribbled furiously in her notebook that evening, she felt an empowering sense of control. Patterns emerged within the chaotic page, the repetitive nature of disregard, the monotony of speaking up yet feeling unheard. Each entry bolstered her awareness of the barriers they faced and the arguments she would construct next time, an arsenal for the inevitable face-off with Tom. The thought of confronting him again filled her with resolve. This time, it would be armed not just with words but with a calculated strategy that underscored their collective worth. She envisioned herself in a speak-out, giving them a voice that was both bold and united, perhaps even rallying her colleagues for a follow-up discussion. This was no longer just her personal endeavor, she was cultivating a movement grounded in a common purpose. The sun went down, but Sarah's lamp burned bright, illuminating her path. Her heart thrummed not with anxiety but with steadfast commitment to develop her leadership. She would no longer be an afterthought, nor would her team. As the clock ticked toward the next day, a realization swept over her: she was learning to confront uncertainty instead of hide within it. The exploration of her capabilities was just beginning. But what would Tom's reaction to her newfound assertiveness unleash? The uncharted waters loomed closer, and she couldn't predict the current. One thing was certain: the fight for recognition would not be forgotten easily. Would her journey into self-advocacy foster solidarity or fracture what was beginning to unite them? The next interaction loomed larger than life. The morning rays nestled through the blinds, casting lines of light across Sarah's cluttered desk. She had hardly slept, her mind racing through strategies and potential outcomes. Each scenario played like a film reel, shadows of her past self flickering ominously among the bright frames of her ambitious vision. Today was the day she unveiled her diligence, her creativity, the culmination of sleepless nights grappling with who she was versus who she wanted to be. She arrived at the diner earlier than usual, the scent of coffee mingling with the sweetness of baked goods creating a deceptive atmosphere of calm. Sarah lingered at the entrance momentarily, struck by the contrast between her stillness and the hurried bustle within. Her colleagues ambled in, their faces etched with the fatigue of their routines. Yet, a sense of purpose thrummed through her skin as she recognized a shared tenacity simmering just beneath their surface. Gathering everyone at the start of their shift was crucial. She had rehearsed her words countless times, aiming to illuminate the path forward without stoking any fear. Sarah stepped into the small break room, feeling the knot of anxiety slide into a focused intention. "Hey everyone, can we gather for a quick meeting before we dive into the chaos?" The chatter hushed, curiosity creasing brows as her colleagues settled in. The moment felt electric. charged with the prospect of something new germinating in the collective psyche. As they formed a semicircle, Sarah felt the cauldron of possibilities boil within her. "I know things have been rough," she began, her voice firm yet warm, "but yesterday we took our first step toward change by speaking out about our experiences." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group, sparking a sense of solidarity she had only imagined until now. From her bag, she fished out her notebook, holding it up for all to see. "I've been documenting our experiences, every moment we've felt overlooked or exploited. I want to create something with this, a plan to confront Tom, to show that we are invaluable, that our perspectives matter." The initial skepticism faded, replaced by cautious enthusiasm. One by one, they began to share stories, each account weaving a larger narrative of struggle and resilience. With every story that unfolded, Sarah's confidence strengthened. Based on the previous conversations and individual entries from her notebook, she began compiling key points that highlighted the injustices faced, paired with suggestions that reflected their capabilities. "What if we present this to Tom? We're not just victims, we're a team of skilled individuals ready to contribute more meaningfully," she proposed. But underneath her striving for unity, a simmering worry persisted. What if Tom dismissed them outright? What if her peers faltered when faced with potential backlash? The stakes were rising, and with them, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily against her chest. Uncertainty coiled around her, but so did something else, an insatiable hunger for change. This was her moment. The catalyst for deeper transformation, not only for herself but also for those alongside her, forging a pathway through the dense fog of self-doubt and professional marginalization. As the meeting concluded, the air buzzed with a palpable energy. They were far from a resolution, but they were on a precipice of collective courage. They left the break room, her heart pounding fiercely with the thrill of shared purpose. But deep within, a lingering question persisted: were they ready to face Tom, and more importantly, the possibility of being unequivocally unheard again? Each step toward his office felt heavier, as she steeled herself for the impending confrontation to come, fully aware that this was only the beginning of a fight she could no longer afford to shy away from. Tomorrow would unveil the challenge of assuming not just her voice, but others as well. Would they rise to the occasion or retreat into the comfortable shadows of complacency? The morning dawned with a palpable tension, the weight of anticipation tethering Sarah to her coffee mug as she sipped, the liquid barely registering against the whirlwind in her mind. She could feel the heat of the day pressing in, mingling with the stir of a dozen possible dialogues she'd rehearsed. Thoughts danced chaotically, but beneath the tumult lurked clear determination. She had come too far to back down now. Arriving at the diner, Sarah noticed the rhythmic clank of dishes and the bustle of her peers. The air was thick with an energy she hadn't felt before, a strange mixture of fear and hope. She had set a course and now only had to navigate the waters of uncertainty. Doubt echoed softly within her. What if today they were met not with understanding, but scorn? She shook off the thought, refusing to let it anchor her. "Hey there," came a familiar voice, puncturing her thoughts. It was Mike, his usual smile dimmed by uncertainty. "You ready for this?" "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied, forcing a lightness she didn't quite feel. As the shift wore on, tension built, every delayed glance from her colleagues amplifying her anxiety. When the time finally drew near, Sarah gathered them in the break room once more. A subtle gravity hung in the air, their trust resting precariously on her shoulders. "Okay everyone," she began, raising her notebook that had become a symbol of their collective voice. "We have to go in with confidence." The nods from her colleagues gave her a momentary lift, but as she steeled herself for Tom's office, dread twisted in her stomach again. She caught sight of the distorted reflection of her anxious demeanor in a nearby window. Was she truly ready for this? "Just remember what we talked about," she whispered to herself, recalling their shared stories, fueled by the struggles they faced together. "We're not asking for much. We just want respect." She led the way forward, the group flanking her like a battalion prepared for war. With each step toward Tom's office, her heartbeat drummed a fierce rhythm in her ears, an echo of her own trepidation. Deep breaths momentarily steadied her, and yet a small voice lingered, taunting her with questions of self-worth. As they stood before the door, she felt the weight of every experience they had shared. The air was charged with unspoken fears and muted hopes. "No more silence," she muttered silently, gathering those final threads of courage. Tom looked up through the glass partition as they entered, surprise flickering across his face. "What's this? A teen meeting? I didn't schedule anything." For a split second, panic surged through her. Was this where they faltered? But she stepped forward, bolstered by their presence, her voice stronger than anticipated. "We're here to discuss our roles and how we can contribute to making this diner better," Sarah declared, the tension in her voice transforming into resolve. The discussion unfolded with intensity, words mingling with passion as her colleagues joined in, their voices intertwining into a symphony of assertiveness. Yet, as they laid bare their experiences, Sarah's doubts didn't fully dissolve. She navigated the tense atmosphere, her gaze darting between Tom's shifting expressions. Would he listen, or would they be met with ridicule? As the confrontation neared a climax, something unexpected happened. Tom's demeanor shifted, a flicker of recognition breaking through his stoic facade. Just as she felt a flicker of hope, he interrupted with a skeptical scoff. "You really think this changes anything? I'm the one who makes the decisions here." In that instant, a mix of defiance and vulnerability surged within her. She looked around at her colleagues, their eyes burning with shared conviction. The fight coursing through her veins demanded action. Failure was no longer an option. She thought of all the overlooked moments, the sacrifices made to simply get by. "I won't let you ignore us," she said, the words spilling forth with newfound clarity. "This isn't just about me or even us, this is about setting a precedent for anyone who feels they don't have a say." The realization struck hard. She was becoming a powerful advocate not just for herself, but for all those who dared to crave change. As Tom opened his mouth to respond, Sarah braced herself for the fallout. Would he dismiss them again? The silence stretched, thick with expectation. Whatever came next could either dismantle her hard-fought convictions or galvanize them into something greater, a reality she could no longer ignore. But safe confrontations had never truly built resilience, and as she faced that moment, a surge of purpose coursed through her. For the first time, she felt certain of one fact: she was no longer fighting for acceptance. She was fighting to be heard. With hope as her armor, she steadied herself for the next step. Little did she know, the true battle lay not with Tom, but within herself. Would she finally step into the leader she was meant to be, or would she retreat into her old self-doubt just as everything hinged on a knife's edge? In the following weeks, the diner buzzed with an undercurrent of change. The confrontation with Tom reverberated through the staff, shifting dynamics in unprecedented ways. Sarah had unearthed a resilient spirit both within herself and among her colleagues, and they slowly began to embody the tenets of respect they had long sought. The walls once dominated by dread and humiliation began to frame a new narrative, one steeped in empowerment and collaboration. No longer did they cower under the weight of their boss's disdain. Instead, they collaborated on menus and shared recipes, taking pride in their collective talents. During breaks, they gathered to discuss not just the day's orders but also their aspirations, nurturing an environment that encouraged personal growth. As Sarah stepped into the diner each morning, there was an invigorating sense of purpose in the air. Each smile exchanged with her colleagues felt like a reaffirmation of the bond they forged in the fire of adversity. They had transitioned from a fragmented group into a cohesive unit, and the friendships cultivated within those walls added layers of support she hadn't known she needed. In the wake of their confrontation, Tom's demeanor had faltered, caught off guard by the fortitude of his staff. No longer could he dismiss their contributions as mere grumbling. He had retreated into a quieter authority, and they capitalized on the space that opened up. Sarah felt a swell of assurance as the once ominous presence of her boss transformed from a paralyzing figure to a challenged leader. The daily shifts transformed into something new, not merely a humdrum routine of serving tables but as a collaborative meeting of minds. The silence that previously suffocated creativity within those walls was lifted. Sarah developed a proposal to enhance the diner's marketing efforts, leveraging the unique talents of each staff member. She knew their stories could resonate beyond the diner, inviting patrons not just for a meal but for an experience forged in resilience. When her proposal was presented to Tom, hesitation hung palpably in the air, but Sarah had grown accustomed to voicing her ambitions clearly. "If we can market our authenticity, our journey together, we can create a community that supports each other," she advocated passionately, drawing on the strength of their shared experience. The power of unity became a focal point of her pitch. Tom's unexpected nod of receptivity validated her growth. It was a small acknowledgement but monumental in her journey. Even more, Tom began to soften in demeanor, a realization dawning that an empowered staff could lead to better productivity. While his approval was far from effusive, it contained an opening for dialogue, a crack in the facade that had held so much power before. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself working not only on her leadership skills but also on herself. The Stoic principles her grandfather cherished unfurled within her consciousness, teaching her to approach challenges with a level head and a centered spirit. She had transformed her moments of fear into opportunities for learning, embracing the full spectrum of her emotions: passion, doubt, courage, and vulnerability, all the while striving to balance them. Defining moments punctuated her growth. She organized weekly meetings where employees could voice their ideas, fears, and aspirations, nurturing a culture of respect and encouragement. This open dialogue spurred creativity, enabling everyone to feel valued, a dramatic departure from the oppressive silence they had endured. Organizations thrived on fresh ideas, and Sarah's proactive approach drew attention to their diner, which began gaining loyal patrons enchanted by the newfound atmosphere. Word spread, and soon, community members flocked in, intrigued not only by the food but also by a welcoming spirit that resonated through the walls. The day dawned when an unexpected call arrived, an invitation to discuss featuring their diner on local television. It was a direct result of the changes initiated by Sarah, and her achievement felt like a culmination of everything she had fought for. When she shared the news with her colleagues, their jubilant cheers enveloped her, anchoring her confidence. Standing before the camera just days later, she spoke not only to the viewers but to herself, a reminder of how far she had come. Every plate we serve tells a story of resilience, community, and respect. This isn't just our job, it's our passion. As the cameras rolled, she felt her grandfather's spirit beside her, filled with pride. In that moment, Sarah demonstrated that she had not only conquered her fears but had also cultivated a thriving environment of empowerment and growth. Her journey had transformed her from a disheartened single mother into a leader who inspired change. The diner flourished as a testament to the resilience of individuals who no longer accepted mediocrity. Her desire to become an attorney now shimmered on the horizon, clearer than it had ever been. She was creating a foundation for herself and Mia to build a future brimming with promise, a testament to the power of courage and the belief that everyone deserved a seat at the table. As she looked out at the bustling diner, Sarah felt a rush of accolades within her. She had achieved what she had once deemed impossible, proving that transformation was not only possible but inevitable in the face of courageous commitment. Today, she didn't just serve food, she served empowerment. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.